The dust had a way of finding everything in Nevada, settling into the creases of her clothes, the corners of her eyes, and the hollow spaces of her heart where hope used to live. Sarah Ashford had been walking for 3 days straight when she stumbled into Gold Hill, her boots worn through at the soles, her lips cracked and bleeding, her dress so covered in grit it looked like it had been dyed the color of the earth itself. It was September 1876, and she had been moving for so long that staying still felt like a betrayal of something she could no longer name. The town emerged from the heat shimmer like a mirage, all weathered wood and false-fronted buildings clinging to the side of a mountain where silver had once promised fortunes. Sarah's legs kept moving even when her mind registered that she had arrived somewhere, anywhere. She had learned not to trust destinations, had learned that stopping meant thinking and thinking meant remembering and remembering meant drowning. She did not see the man on the black gelding until his shadow fell across her path. Her feet kept moving, carrying her forward as if his presence was just another obstacle to navigate around like a rock or a tumble of sagebrush. "Madam." His voice was low, roughened by wind and years. "Madam, you need to stop." Sarah's feet continued their rhythm. Left, right. She had walked out of St. Louis 6 months ago, had walked through Kansas and Colorado and into this God-forsaken corner of Nevada, and her body no longer remembered how to do anything else. A hand caught her arm, gentle but firm, and the sudden cessation of movement sent such a jolt through her system that her knees buckled. She would have fallen if strong arms had not caught her, lowering her carefully to sit on the edge of the wooden walkway that ran along the main street. "Easy now." The voice came from above her, and she forced her eyes to focus on the man crouching in front of her. He was maybe 28 or 29, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of the sky just before a storm. A silver badge caught the light on his vest. "When did you last have water?" Sarah opened her mouth to answer, but her throat was too dry to form words. She could not remember. Yesterday, the day before, time had lost its meaning somewhere between grief and motion. The man pressed a canteen into her hands, helping her guide it to her lips. "Slow sips," he instructed. "Not too much at once or you will be sick." The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was the most magnificent thing Sarah had experienced in recent memory. She took 3 careful sips before he gently pulled the canteen away. "I'm Yates Reeves," he said, "marshal of this town such as it is. What is your name?" "Sarah." Her voice came out as a rasp. "Sarah Ashford." "Well, Miss Ashford, where exactly were you planning to walk to?" The question struck her as absurd. Planning implied purpose, implied direction, implied a future that extended beyond the next step. She stared at him, and something in her expression must have communicated what words could not, because his face softened. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's get you somewhere you can rest. Can you stand?" She could stand. She could always stand. Standing and walking were the only things she seemed capable of anymore. But when she tried to move forward to resume the endless journey, Yates Reeves stepped in front of her. "The boarding house is right here," he said, gesturing to the building beside them. "Mrs. Chen will see you settled. You need food and sleep." "I need to keep moving." The words came automatically, a truth she had repeated to herself across hundreds of miles. Why such a simple question? Such an impossible one to answer. Because stopping meant facing the truth that her husband and infant daughter had died of cholera in a wagon camp outside of Independence, Missouri. Because staying still meant hearing the echo of her baby's last cries. Because if she kept walking, maybe she could walk far enough to become someone else entirely, someone who had never loved and lost so completely that it felt like her very bones had been hollowed out. "I just do," she said instead. Yates studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen for the first time in months. Most people looked through her, this dusty woman with wild eyes and restless feet. But the Marshal of Gold Hill looked at her like she was a puzzle he was determined to solve. "Tell you what," he said finally. "You let Mrs. Chen give you a room and a hot meal, and tomorrow, if you still want to walk, I will not stop you. But you look about ready to collapse, and I would rather not have to bury another traveler who did not know when to rest." The practical concern in his voice, devoid of pity but full of genuine care, was what made her nod. She let him guide her up the steps and through the door of the boarding house, let him explain the situation to a small Chinese woman who looked Sarah up and down with sharp, assessing eyes. "She pays or she works," Mrs. Chen said bluntly. "Put it on my account," Yates replied. "You have too many people on your account, Marshal. You are not made of money. Then I will work it off. But she needs a room and food, and she needs it now. Mrs. Chen muttered something in Cantonese that Sarah suspected was uncomplimentary, but she beckoned Sarah to follow her up a narrow staircase. The room was small and spare, containing a bed, a washstand, and a single chair. To Sarah, it looked impossibly luxurious. "Bath water costs extra, Mrs. Chen said. "But Marshal will pay, apparently, since he is a fool with a soft heart. I bring food in 1 hour. You rest." Left alone, Sarah stood in the center of the room, her body still vibrating with the urge to move. She took a step toward the door, then stopped. The Marshal had asked her to stay 1 night. 1 night was not so long. She could manage 1 night. She lowered herself onto the bed, and the softness of the mattress after months of sleeping on hard ground was so overwhelming that tears sprang to her eyes. She had not cried since Kansas, had walked herself dry of tears, but now they came hot and fast, soaking into the pillow as her body finally surrendered to exhaustion. When she woke, the room was dark and a tray of food sat on the chair by her bed. Bread, stew, and an apple that looked slightly wizened but real nonetheless. Her stomach cramped with hunger, and she ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind already planning her departure at first light. But when dawn came, painting the rough boards of her room in shades of gold and pink, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Yates Reeves standing in the hallway, hat in hand. "Morning, Miss Ashford. I wondered if you might walk with me." The irony of the invitation was not lost on her. "I thought you wanted me to stop walking." "I want you to stop walking alone into the desert with no destination. Walking through town with company is different." He paused. "I find I do my best thinking while moving." "Thought you might be the same way." It was too perceptive, too understanding, and Sarah felt something in her chest constrict. But she found herself nodding, found herself following him down the stairs and out into the cool morning air. Gold Hill was waking up around them. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the sound of hammers rang out from the stamp mills processing silver ore from the nearby mines. Yates walked slowly, matching his pace to hers, his presence solid and steady beside her. "This town is dying," he said conversationally. "The silver is running out, and people are leaving faster than they are arriving. 5 years ago, there were 3,000 people here. Now there are maybe 500, and that number drops every month." "Why do you stay?" The question emerged before Sarah could stop it. "Because someone needs to. Because the people who are still here deserve law and order same as anywhere else. Because I made a promise to the territorial governor, and I keep my promises." He glanced at her. "What were you before you started walking? A wife, a mother." The words tasted like ashes. And now, nothing. It was the truth, stark and simple. They walked in silence for a while, following the curve of the street as it climbed the hillside. The desert stretched out below them, vast and indifferent, the same desert Sarah had been crossing for months. "I do not believe that," Yates said finally. "You survived crossing that desert alone. That takes strength most people do not have, takes determination, takes will." "It takes running away," Sarah countered. "That is all I have been doing, running from what I cannot face. Maybe." He stopped, turning to face her fully. "Or maybe you have been walking towards something you have not found yet, toward a place where you can stop safely, toward a reason to stay still." His eyes held hers, and Sarah felt something shift inside her, a tiny crack in the armor of motion she had built around herself. She looked away first, her gaze traveling over the ramshackle buildings, the scarred hillsides, the vast sky overhead. "There is nothing for me here," she said softly. "There is nothing for you out in that desert either, except more walking and eventually death." His voice was gentle but firm. "Stay a week. Give yourself a chance to rest properly, to remember what it feels like to be in one place. If after a week you still want to leave, I will pack you supplies myself and wish you well. But give yourself a week." Sarah wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to start walking, to put this town and this too perceptive Marshal behind her. But she was so tired. Tired of dust and heat, tired of her own heartbeat counting steps, tired of the endless voice in her head that said, "Move, move, keep moving." "1 week," she heard herself say. The smile that crossed Yates Reeves's face was small but genuine, warming his storm-colored eyes. 1 week. "Now, let me show you the rest of this dying town I am so determined to protect." He took her through Gold Hill with the pride of a man showing off something precious, pointing out the Chinese section where Mrs. Chen's boarding house stood, the saloons and gambling halls that still did brisk business despite the declining population, the mine entrances that scarred the hillside like gaping mouths. He introduced her to people they passed. Old Tom the blacksmith, whose hands were gnarled from decades of work. Mary Sullivan, who ran the general store with her 2 daughters. Dr. Harrison, who served the town and the surrounding mining camps. Everyone greeted the Marshal with warmth and respect, and Sarah found herself swept along in the wake of his presence. For the first time in months, she was not just a strange woman walking alone. She was someone Yates Reeves had chosen to spend time with, and that seemed to grant her a measure of acceptance she had not experienced since leaving St. Louis. By the time they returned to the boarding house, the sun was high and Sarah's legs ached with familiar weariness. But it was a different kind of tired than the bone-deep exhaustion of endless walking. This was the tiredness of the body engaged in purposeful activity, not mindless flight. "Thank you," she said as they stopped outside the front door. "For the walk, for everything. Same time tomorrow." Yates asked, "I find I am getting partial to morning constitutionals, and it is nicer with company." Sarah knew she should say no, should maintain her distance, should prepare to leave at the end of the promised week. But she found herself nodding, found herself almost looking forward to the prospect of another walk through this dying silver town with this steady, solid man who seemed to see past her defenses without trying to tear them down. The pattern established itself over the next several days. Each morning, Yates would knock on her door, and they would walk together through Gold Hill and sometimes beyond, into the hills where mine tailings scarred the earth, and hardy desert plants clung to life in impossible places. They talked, or sometimes they did not talk, and both felt equally comfortable. He told her about growing up in Texas, about working as a deputy in Virginia City before taking the Marshal position in Gold Hill, about his dreams of eventually owning a ranch where he could raise horses. She told him small things about her life before, carefully edited stories that did not touch on the raw wounds still bleeding inside her. On the 4th day, they walked farther than usual, following an old mining road up into the hills. The exertion felt good, felt right, and Sarah realized with some surprise that her restlessness was easing. The urge to keep walking indefinitely was still there, but quieter now, less desperate. "Can I ask you something?" Yates said as they paused to rest on an outcropping of rock that gave a sweeping view of the valley below. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Fair enough." He was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the horizon. "What happened to them? Your husband and child?" Sarah's breath caught. No one had asked her directly, and she had been grateful for that. But now, faced with the question, she found that the words wanted to come out, wanted to be spoken into the dry Nevada air. "Cholera," she said. "In a wagon camp outside Independence. We were on our way to California. John had dreams of farming in Sacramento, said we could build a new life there. We made it 3 weeks into the journey before the sickness came." She wrapped her arms around herself, holding tight against the memories. Emma was only 6 months old. She died first, then John, 2 days later. "I survived, and you have been walking ever since." "I buried them and I started walking west because that was the direction we had been going. It seemed important to finish the journey, except there was no finishing it. There was just walking and walking and walking, and eventually I forgot why I had started. I only knew I could not stop." Yates was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I am sorry for your loss, for your pain, for all of it. Everyone is sorry." Sarah heard the bitterness in her own voice. Sorry does not bring them back. Sorry does not fill the hole they left. Sorry is just a word people say when they do not know what else to offer. "You are right." He turned to look at her fully. "Sorry is inadequate, but it is also true. I am sorry you lost them. I am sorry you have been carrying this alone. And I am sorry that the world is so full of pain that good people like you end up walking themselves to death trying to escape it." Tears blurred Sarah's vision. "I do not know how to stop," she whispered. "I do not know how to be still with this grief. It is too big, too heavy. If I stop moving, it will crush me." "Then do not stop moving. But maybe move with purpose instead of just running. Maybe move towards something instead of away." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, solid and real. "Maybe move toward a life that would make their memory mean something. I do not know how to do that, neither do I. But maybe we could figure it out together." Sarah looked at him, at this man who had given her water and shelter and kindness without asking for anything in return, who had walked with her every morning without trying to fix her or change her or make her pain smaller than it was. Something in his eyes made her brave enough to hold on to his hand instead of pulling away. "I am broken," she said. "I do not know if I can be anything else anymore. I am not asking you to be anything other than what you are." His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "I am just asking you to consider staying, to give this town and yourself a chance, to let yourself rest. And you," the question emerged before she could stop it. "Why do you care what I do?" Yates smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his whole face. "Because from the moment I saw you walking down that street, eyes like a wounded animal and feet that would not stop moving, I knew you were someone worth knowing. Someone worth saving, if you would let yourself be saved. And selfishly, because this town is dying, and most days I feel like I am dying with it. But when I walk with you, I remember what it feels like to have purpose beyond just maintaining order in a place everyone else is abandoning." "That is too much to put on me," Sarah said, but her voice was soft, not accusatory. "Then put it on me instead. Let me be your reason to stop walking, at least for a while. Let me show you that staying can be as brave as running, that building something new does not betray what you lost." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the reasons why this was impossible, why she was too damaged and he was asking for too much, and this town was the wrong place for new beginnings. But the words would not come. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly toward him, found herself holding tighter to his hand, found herself nodding. "All right," she said. "I will stay. Not just a week. I will stay and see what happens." The relief that washed over Yates's face was profound, and Sarah realized with a start that he had been genuinely worried she would refuse, that he cared more than she had allowed herself to believe. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You will not regret it." Sarah was not sure she believed that, but she wanted to. For the first time since she had started walking, she wanted to believe in the possibility of a future that was not just endless motion and grief. They walked back to town slowly, still holding hands, and Sarah felt the first fragile threads of connection forming between them. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, this feeling of stepping towards something instead of away from everything. "Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow when Sarah asked about paying for her room through work instead of charity, but she agreed readily enough. "You can help with laundry and cooking," she said, "and cleaning rooms when minors come to town. I pay fair wages and you earn your keep." The work was hard and physical, but Sarah found she did not mind. It gave her days structure, gave her hands purpose beyond just propelling her forward step after step. And every morning, Yates would arrive to walk with her before she started her chores, his presence becoming as reliable as sunrise. 3 weeks turned into a month, and Sarah began to recognize the rhythms of Gold Hill. She learned which miners were kind and which were trouble, learned that Mrs. Chen had a wicked sense of humor beneath her stern exterior, learned that Dr. Harrison had lost his own wife to scarlet fever and understood grief in ways most people did not. She also learned about Yates Reeves. Learned that he was unfailingly fair in his dealings, that he broke up fights with words more often than fists, that he sent half his salary to his widowed mother in Texas. Learned that he loved horses and could gentle even the most skittish animal, that he read everything he could get his hands on, that he believed in justice, even when the law fell short. And she learned that she was falling in love with him, slowly and terrifyingly, her heart thawing after months of frozen grief. It happened in small moments. The way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, his eyes soft with something that might have been tenderness. The way he always had an apple or a piece of hard candy in his pocket to share during their morning walks. The way he listened when she finally began to speak more freely about Emma and John, never telling her to move on or let go, just bearing witness to her pain. One evening in late October, as the first hints of winter crept into the desert air, Yates found her sitting on the steps of the boarding house, watching the sun set over the mountains in shades of orange and purple and gold. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Sarah shifted to make room and he settled beside her, their shoulders almost touching. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade from the sky. "I have been thinking," Yates said eventually, "about the future of this town. It does not have much of one, from what you have said. Maybe not as a silver boomtown, but that does not mean it has to die entirely. There is still ranching land in the valleys, still opportunities for people willing to work hard and adapt. You are thinking of staying even when the mines close completely. I am thinking of building something that lasts beyond the silver rush." He turned to look at her. "I am thinking of buying land, starting that horse ranch I have always dreamed about. Building a home that is more than just a room in a boarding house or a marshal's office." Sarah's heart beat faster. She understood what he was really saying, the question he was asking without asking directly. "That sounds like a good plan," she said carefully. It does. But it would be better with a partner, someone who understands what it means to start over, to build something new from broken pieces. Someone brave enough to walk across a desert alone and strong enough to choose to stay when they could leave. Yates. His name came out as barely more than a whisper. He reached out and took her hand, the gesture so familiar now that Sarah could not remember what it felt like not to have his touch grounding her. "I love you, Sarah Ashford. I know it is too soon, and I know you are still healing, and I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I love you, and I want to build a life with you if you will have me." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of grief this time. They were tears of something that felt dangerously close to hope, to joy, to the possibility of happiness she had thought lost forever. "I love you too," she said, and the admission felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating. "I did not want to. I tried not to. But I love you, and I do not know what to do with that. Say yes." Yates's voice was rough with emotion. "Say you will marry me, that you will help me build that ranch, that you will let yourself be happy again even if it feels like a betrayal of what you lost." "It does feel like betrayal," Sarah admitted. "Loving you feels like saying they did not matter, that their loss does not matter. Or maybe it is saying that their lives mattered so much that you are brave enough to honor them by living fully instead of just surviving. Maybe it is saying that love is worth the risk of loss, that building something new does not erase what came before." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I am not asking you to forget them or replace them. I am just asking you to let yourself have a future." Sarah thought about Emma's tiny fingers wrapped around hers, about John's laugh and his dreams of California orchards. She thought about the months of walking, the miles of dust and grief and purposeless motion. And she thought about these past weeks, about morning walks and steady hands and a man who had given her a reason to stop running. "Yes," she said, the word emerging strong and clear. "Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will help you build that ranch. Yes, I will stay." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the last light faded from the sky. Sarah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt her own restless feet finally settle. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Dr. Harrison's front room, with Mrs. Chen and Tom the blacksmith standing witness. Sarah wore a dress Mrs. Chen had helped her sew from blue calico, and Yates wore his best shirt and vest, his silver marshal's badge polished to a shine. "Do you, Yates Reeves, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Dr. Harrison asked, performing the ceremony in his capacity as justice of the peace. "I do," Yates said, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "And do you, Sarah Ashford, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Sarah thought about all the reasons she should say no, all the ways this could end in heartbreak and loss. But she also thought about the way Yates looked at her, the way he had given her space to grieve while offering steady support, the way he made her believe in futures again. "I do," she said clearly. "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Nevada, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Marshal." Yates cupped Sarah's face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle, and kissed her softly. It was a kiss full of promise and hope, a kiss that tasted of new beginnings and hard-won peace. The small gathering celebrated with cake Mrs. Chen had baked and whiskey Tom produced from some mysterious source. It was nothing like the elaborate wedding Sarah had imagined as a girl, but it felt right, felt real, felt like a true beginning. That night, in the room at the boarding house that was now officially theirs until they could build the ranch house, Yates held Sarah close and whispered promises against her hair. Promises of patience and love, of building slowly and carefully, of honoring the past while creating a future. "I am afraid," Sarah admitted in the darkness. "Afraid of losing you the way I lost them. Afraid that happiness is just a prelude to more grief." "I am afraid too," Yates said. "Fear is part of loving someone, but so is courage, and you are the bravest person I know. You walked across a desert alone. You survived what would have destroyed most people. You chose to stop running and start building. That takes more courage than I can fathom." "You gave me a reason to stop," Sarah said softly. "You gave me a reason to stay when I had forgotten how. And you gave me a reason to believe this dying town and my own life still had purpose, still had possibility." He kissed her forehead gently. "We saved each other, I think." Sarah nestled closer, letting herself sink into his warmth, into his steadiness, into the radical act of trusting in tomorrow. Her feet, so accustomed to endless motion, were finally still. Finally home. The next months were a blur of activity and planning. Yates continued his marshal duties while searching for the right land for their ranch. Sarah worked for Mrs. Chen and began to truly integrate into the community of Gold Hill, forming friendships with Mary Sullivan and her daughters, helping Dr. Harrison organize his chaotic medical supplies, even learning some Cantonese from Mrs. Chen. In December, Yates found what he had been looking for: 200 acres in a valley 15 miles from Gold Hill, with good water and grazing land, sheltered from the worst of the desert winds. The price was cheap because the silver bust was driving down land values, but to Sarah and Yates, it looked like paradise. They moved in February of 1877 into a rough cabin that had been built by the previous owner, a prospector who had given up and returned east. It was small and drafty, but it was theirs, and they set about making it a home with fierce determination. Yates proved to be as skilled with building as he was with horses. He expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and a kitchen, fixing the leaks in the roof and installing real glass windows that Sarah cleaned until they sparkled. Sarah planted a garden, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil, and began acquiring chickens for eggs and meat. They worked from dawn until dusk, building fences and clearing land and planning for the horses Yates dreamed of raising. It was hard, exhausting work, but Sarah found it healing in ways she had not expected. There was something powerful about creating instead of destroying, about building a future instead of running from the past. On a warm evening in April, as they sat on the porch of their expanding cabin watching the sunset, Sarah realized she had not thought about walking in weeks. The restlessness that had driven her for so long had finally quieted, replaced by the deep satisfaction of work well done and love freely given. "You look happy," Yates observed, reaching over to take her hand. "I am," Sarah said, and the words rang true. "I did not think I could be again, but I am." "Good." He squeezed her hand gently. "You deserve happiness, Sarah. You deserve all the good things this life can offer. So do you." She turned to look at him, at this man who had become her anchor and her home. "Thank you for not giving up on me. For seeing past the broken woman walking through town and believing there was still something worth saving." "I never had to save you," Yates said seriously. "You saved yourself. You chose to stop, chose to stay, chose to build. I just had the incredible luck of being here when you did." Sarah leaned over to kiss him, a slow, sweet kiss that communicated what words could not. When they pulled apart, she rested her head on his shoulder and watched the last light fade from the sky, feeling more at peace than she had in longer than she could remember. In May, the first horses arrived, 3 mares, and a young stallion that Yates had purchased from a rancher near Virginia City. He spent hours working with them, his patience and skill evident in the way even the skittish stallion calmed under his hands. Sarah found she had a knack for the business side of ranching. keeping careful records of expenses and income, managing their limited resources with the practical intelligence she had developed through months of survival. They made a good team, balancing each other's strengths and supporting each other's weaknesses. Gold Hill continued its slow decline, but their ranch thrived. Word spread about Yates Reeves's way with horses, and people began coming from miles around to buy animals he had trained or to pay him to gentle their own difficult mounts. Sarah's garden produced abundantly, and she began selling vegetables and eggs in town, building her own small income stream. On a hot July afternoon, Sarah realized with a start that her monthly courses were late. Very late. She sat in the garden, hand pressed to her still flat stomach, emotions warring inside her. Terror and hope, grief and joy, all tangled together so tightly she could not separate one from the other. She told Yates that evening after supper, her voice shaking slightly. "I think I might be pregnant." He went very still, his eyes searching her face. "How do you feel about that?" Terrified, Sarah admitted. "I lost Emma. What if I lose this baby too? What if something goes wrong? What if I am not strong enough to survive losing another child?" Yates came around the table and knelt in front of her, taking both her hands in his. "You are strong enough to survive anything," he said firmly, "but you will not have to survive alone. I am here and I will be with you every step of the way. Whether this pregnancy ends in joy or sorrow, we will face it together." "I want this baby," Sarah whispered. "I want to give you a child, want to have that part of life again, but I am so afraid." "Fear and hope can live together," Yates said gently. "Let yourself feel both. Let yourself want this while also being afraid. There is no betrayal in that, no weakness, just humanity." Sarah pulled him close, holding tight to this man who understood her so completely. "I love you," she said fiercely. "I love you too, so much." He pulled back enough to place a gentle hand on her stomach. "And I already love this little one, whatever happens." Dr. Harrison confirmed the pregnancy a week later and declared Sarah healthy and strong. "The baby should come in February or early March," he said. "Barring complications, I see no reason this should not be a successful pregnancy." The months that followed were a study in contrasts. Sarah bloomed with pregnancy, her body rounding with new life. But she was also plagued by memories of carrying Emma, by the fear that history would repeat itself. Yates was endlessly patient, holding her when nightmares woke her, talking her through the panic attacks that sometimes seized her without warning. The ranch continued to grow. They hired a young man named Peter to help with the heavier work as Sarah's pregnancy advanced, and Yates began construction on a proper barn to house their growing herd of horses. In November, Sarah was in town selling eggs when she encountered a family preparing to leave Gold Hill for California. The wife, a tired-looking woman named Margaret, was trying to manage 3 small children while her husband loaded their wagon. "Can I help?" Sarah asked, steadying the youngest child who was tottering dangerously close to the wagon wheel. "Bless you," Margaret said gratefully. "This one is determined to hurt herself before we even leave town." Sarah helped corral the children while their parents finished packing. As she did, the oldest child, a girl of maybe 5, looked at Sarah's rounded belly with wide eyes. "Are you going to have a baby?" she asked with a child's directness. "I am," Sarah confirmed. "Mama had a baby, but it died." The little girl said it matter-of-factly, the way children did when they had not yet learned that death was something to whisper about. "She cried a lot." Margaret's face crumpled, and Sarah felt a sharp pang of recognition. She knelt down, level with the little girl despite the awkwardness of her pregnant belly. "I had a baby who died too," she said gently. "Her name was Emma, and I loved her very much." "It is all right for your mama to cry about her baby. Sometimes crying is how we show love." Did you cry? The little girl asked. Very much, for a long time. But you are having another baby now. Does that mean you stopped being sad? Sarah considered the question carefully. I am still sad about Emma, she said. I will always be sad about her, but I am also happy about this new baby. People can hold more than one feeling at a time. Margaret had tears running down her face. Thank you, she said quietly, for understanding, for saying it out loud. Where are you headed? Sarah asked, straightening up with some effort. California. Sacramento, if we make it. My husband heard there is work there, real work, not just chasing played-out silver mines. Sarah thought about John's dreams of Sacramento, about the journey that had ended in a cholera camp and changed the course of her entire life. I hope you make it, she said sincerely. I hope you find everything you are looking for there. After the family had gone, Sarah stood in the dusty street of Gold Hill, one hand on her rounded belly, and felt the strange loops and connections of life. That could have been her, leaving with a wagon load of belongings and hope. Instead, she was here, rooted in Nevada soil, carrying a new life and building a future she had never imagined. When she told Yates about the encounter that evening, he listened thoughtfully. Does it bother you, he asked, that you never made it to California like you and John planned? No, Sarah said, and realized it was true. California was his dream, not mine. I was just following along because that is what wives did. This ranch, this life we are building, this is my dream, ours. Good. Yates kissed her temple. Because I cannot imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else. Christmas came, cold and clear, and Mrs. Chen insisted on hosting them for dinner along with Dr. Harrison and several other friends from Gold Hill. It was a warm, boisterous affair, full of laughter and good food, and the kind of community Sarah had not experienced since leaving St. Louis. You look content, Dr. Harrison observed as he helped Sarah to more pie. I am, Sarah said, watching Yates laugh at something Tom the blacksmith had said. More than I ever thought I could be again. Grief does not disappear, the doctor said quietly, but it does transform. It becomes part of the landscape of who we are instead of the only thing we can see. Is that what happened for you after your wife died, eventually? It took years, and I am not sure I am fully there yet. But I have learned to live alongside the loss, to make room for both the sorrow and the joy. Sarah nodded, understanding completely. Emma and John would always be part of her, would always occupy space in her heart. But there was room now for Yates too, for this baby growing inside her, for the life they were building together. As winter deepened, Sarah grew increasingly uncomfortable, her back aching and her sleep disrupted. Yates treated her like spun glass, hovering and worrying until Sarah had to gently remind him that pregnancy was not an illness. I know, he said, looking sheepish, but I cannot help worrying. You and this baby are everything to me. We are going to be fine, Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. Dr. Harrison said I am healthy and strong. The baby is growing well. Everything is as it should be. But as her due date approached in late February, Sarah's anxiety increased. She had nightmares about Emma's death, about holding another lifeless infant, about losing this child before she even had a chance to know him or her. Yates held her through the nighttime panics, whispering reassurances and promises, his solid presence the only thing that kept her tethered. Whatever happens, we face it together, he reminded her over and over. You are not alone in this. Labor began on a cold morning in early March, 3 weeks after Sarah's estimated due date. The pain started slowly, a tightening across her belly that gradually intensified. Dr. Harrison arrived by mid-morning, summoned by Yates, who had ridden to Gold Hill at breakneck speed. Everything looks normal, the doctor assured them. First babies often take their time. Sarah, you are going to need to be patient. Patience was not easy to come by as the hours stretched on and the pains intensified. Sarah walked the cabin, trying to ease the pressure, while Yates hovered anxiously and Dr. Harrison monitored her progress. By nightfall, Sarah was exhausted and frightened, the pain overwhelming and the memories of Emma's birth too vivid. "I cannot do this," she gasped between contractions. "I cannot lose another baby. I cannot survive it again." "You are not losing this baby," Yates said firmly, gripping her hand. "This baby is strong and healthy and eager to meet us. You just need to hold on a little longer." "Listen to your husband," Dr. Harrison said. "I can hear the baby's heartbeat, strong and steady. You are doing everything right, Sarah, just a bit more." The final hours of labor blurred together in a haze of pain and effort and fear. But finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, Sarah felt the overwhelming urge to push, and Dr. Harrison's voice became urgent and encouraging. "That is it, Sarah. One more push. Give me one more good push." Sarah bore down with everything she had, her hand crushing Yates's, and suddenly there was a release of pressure and then the most beautiful sound in the world, a baby's indignant cry. "It is a boy," Dr. Harrison announced, holding up a red-faced, squalling infant. "A healthy, strong baby boy." Sarah sobbed with relief and joy as the doctor placed her son on her chest. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and Yates's storm-colored eyes and tiny, grasping fingers that immediately wrapped around Sarah's thumb. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my beautiful boy." Yates was crying too, unashamed, his hand gentle on his son's head. "He is perfect," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Sarah, he is absolutely perfect. What will you name him?" Dr. Harrison asked as he worked to clean up. Sarah and Yates had discussed names for months, unable to agree on anything that felt exactly right. But now, looking at her son's face, Sarah knew. "James," she said. "James Yates Reeves, after my father and his. If that is all right with you," she added, looking at Yates. "It is perfect," Yates said. "Hello, James. Welcome to the world, son." The first weeks with James were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Sarah was overwhelmed by the fierce love she felt for this tiny person, but also haunted by memories of Emma, by the constant fear that something would go wrong. Yates seemed to sense her anxiety and took on as much of the care as he could, changing diapers and walking the floor with James when he fussed, giving Sarah time to rest and recover. Mrs. Chen came out from Gold Hill with food and practical advice, as did several other women from town, creating a support network Sarah had not known she needed. "It gets easier," Mary Sullivan told her as she helped Sarah wash diapers one afternoon. "The fear does not go away entirely, but it becomes more manageable. You learn to trust that they are strong, that they will survive." Sarah wanted to believe her, but every small sniffle or cry from James sent her into a panic. She checked on him constantly through the night, terrified that she would wake to find him still and cold like Emma had been. One night, 3 weeks after James's birth, Yates found her sitting beside the cradle at 2 in the morning, watching their son sleep. "Sarah," he said gently, "you need to rest. James is fine. He is healthy and strong." "I know," Sarah whispered, "but I keep thinking about Emma, about how quickly she went from healthy to sick to gone. What if it happens again? What if I lose him too?" Yates knelt beside her, taking her hand. "You might," he said, and the brutal honesty of it made Sarah flinch. "Not because you did anything wrong or because you do not love him enough, but because the world is unpredictable and cruel sometimes. But Sarah, you cannot live every moment in fear of loss. You will miss the joy of having him if you are always bracing for grief. I do not know how to stop being afraid." "Then be afraid," Feel the fear, but do not let it steal the happiness you have right now. James is here, alive and healthy and loved. Emma's death was a tragedy, but it does not mean James's life will end the same way. Sarah looked at her son, at his perfect little face peaceful in sleep, and felt something in her chest loosen. Yates was right. She could not protect James from every possible harm, could not prevent all loss through sheer vigilance. All she could do was love him, care for him, and trust that it would be enough. "Thank you," she said softly, leaning into Yates's embrace. "For always knowing what I need to hear, even when it is hard." "We take care of each other," Yates said simply. "That is what we do." As spring turned to summer, Sarah gradually relaxed into motherhood. James thrived, growing fat and happy on her milk, his personality emerging with each passing week. He was a serious baby studying the world with intense focus, but when he smiled, it was like the sun coming out. The ranch continued to prosper. Yates's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and they had more business than they could handle. Peter, their hired hand, proved reliable and skilled, allowing Yates to focus on the training while Peter managed the day-to-day care of the growing herd. In August, the territorial governor appointed a new marshal for Gold Hill, freeing Yates from his law enforcement duties. He had been planning to resign anyway, wanting to focus fully on the ranch, but it still felt like the end of an era. "You miss it?" Sarah asked as they sat on the porch one evening, James drowsing against her shoulder. "Sometimes," Yates admitted. "I miss feeling like I was making a difference protecting people. But this," he gestured at the ranch, at Sarah and James, "this is what I really wanted all along. A family, a home. A life that is mine to build instead of just maintaining order in someone else's dying dream." "Gold Hill is not dead yet," Sarah pointed out. "There are still people there who need supplies and community." "True. But it is not what it was, and it will never be again. The silver is gone, and people are following it. In 10 years, Gold Hill will probably be a ghost town." Sarah thought about the thriving community she had found when she stumbled into town nearly 2 years ago, thought about Mrs. Chen and Dr. Harrison and all the others who had welcomed her. "That is sad. It is the way of things out here. Boom and bust, build up and abandon, but we will still be here building something that lasts." He reached over to stroke James's downy head, "Building a legacy for him and whatever other children we might have." "Other children?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I just got this one out into the world. Let me recover before we start planning the next." Yates laughed. "Fair enough, but someday. I would like James to have siblings. I would like to fill this house with noise and chaos and love." Sarah smiled, imagining it. The fear was still there, the knowledge that loving meant risking loss, but it was bearable now. Manageable. "Someday," she agreed. "When I am ready." The seasons turned, and James grew from an infant to a toddler, walking and talking and exploring his world with fearless curiosity. Sarah watched him chase chickens and pet horses and climb anything he could reach, her heart in her throat but also swelling with pride at his independence. In the spring of 1879, Sarah realized she was pregnant again. This time, the fear was less overwhelming. She had carried one baby to term successfully, had proven to herself that she could survive childbirth and early motherhood. That knowledge did not eliminate the anxiety entirely, but it made it bearable. Yates was overjoyed, swinging her around carefully before remembering her condition and setting her down with elaborate care. James, nearly 2 years old now, did not quite understand what it meant to be getting a brother or sister, but he sensed the excitement and joined in enthusiastically. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Sarah was busy chasing a toddler and managing the ranch, and had less time to dwell on her fears. Dr. Harrison continued to monitor her carefully, and everything progressed normally. In November, Sarah went into labor in the middle of the night. It was faster this time, her body remembering what to do, and by morning she was holding a squalling baby girl with Yates's dark hair and Sarah's green eyes. "Emma," Sarah whispered, looking down at her daughter. "I want to name her Emma, after my first daughter. Is that all right?" Yates looked concerned. "Are you sure? Will it not be painful to say her name every day?" "It will be a remembrance," Sarah said. "A way of honoring her, of making sure she is not forgotten. This Emma is not a replacement for the one I lost. She is her own person, but she can carry the name forward, can give it new life and meaning." "Then Emma it is," Yates agreed, kissing Sarah's forehead. "Emma Grace Reeves." James was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to touch her constantly with his chubby toddler hands. Sarah supervised carefully, teaching him to be gentle, and was rewarded by seeing the beginnings of what she hoped would be a strong sibling bond. The years that followed were full and rich, busy with the demands of raising children and running a ranch. They had 2 more children, another boy named Thomas in 1881 and a girl named Lucy in 1883. The house Yates had built expanded to accommodate the growing family. Rooms added on as needed until it sprawled across the land like a contented cat stretching in the sun. Gold Hill did indeed decline, the population dwindling to a few hundred hardy souls who refused to abandon their homes even as the mines closed and businesses shuttered. But Mrs. Chen remained, as did Dr. Harrison and a few others, and the Reeves family made regular trips to town to maintain those precious connections. Mrs. Chen became Auntie Chen to the Reeves children, dispensing wisdom and candy in equal measure. Dr. Harrison became a beloved family friend, always welcome at their table. The community that remained in Gold Hill might have been small, but it was tight-knit and loyal. The ranch thrived. Yates's horses were sought after throughout Nevada and into California, known for their intelligence and gentle training. Sarah managed the business side with skill, ensuring they charged fair prices and maintained good relationships with customers. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and, more importantly, they were happy. On a warm evening in June of 1885, Sarah stood on the porch of their home watching her children play in the yard. James, now 8 years old, was teaching 5-year-old Emma how to rope fence posts while Thomas and Lucy chased each other in circles, shrieking with laughter. Yates was in the barn finishing up the evening chores, and the smell of dinner cooking drifted from the kitchen. Sarah thought about the woman she had been 9 years ago, walking into Gold Hill with worn-out boots and a heart too damaged to feel anything but the need to keep moving. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. She had walked so long against the wind, fighting and fleeing and running from pain too great to bear. She had forgotten how to stop, forgotten that rest was possible, forgotten that joy could exist alongside grief. And then, Yates Reeves had given her a reason. Not by fixing her or saving her or trying to erase her pain, but by seeing her fully and loving her anyway. By offering steady presence and patient understanding. By showing her that stopping did not mean surrendering to grief, but rather choosing to build something new. Yates emerged from the barn and made his way toward the house, stopping to roughhouse with the boys and lift Lucy onto his shoulders. He looked up and caught Sarah watching, his face breaking into a smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years. He came up the porch steps and pulled her into his arms, Lucy giggling from her perch on his shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am," Sarah said simply. "How different my life is from what I thought it would be. How grateful I am that you made me stop walking. You made yourself stop, Yates corrected gently. I just gave you a place where stopping felt safe. You gave me everything, Sarah said, reaching up to cup his face. You gave me a home and a family and a future I thought was lost forever. You gave me a reason to choose life over just surviving. And you gave me purpose beyond just existing. You gave me love and family and a life worth living. He kissed her softly, Lucy protesting from above about grown-up mushiness. We gave each other a second chance. Sarah smiled, turning to watch their children play as the sun set over the mountains in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in her heart, Emma and John rested peacefully, their memory honored but no longer a source of crippling pain. They would always be part of her story, but they were not the whole story anymore. The whole story included Yates and the children running through the yard, and this ranch they had built from nothing. It included morning walks and patient hands, and the radical act of choosing to stay. It included grief transformed into wisdom, loss alchemized into deeper love, pain that had carved out spaces large enough to hold tremendous joy. Sarah had walked against the wind for so long she had forgotten how to stop. But the cowboy had given her a reason, and in stopping, she had found everything she never knew she was walking toward. As twilight deepened and Yates called the children in for supper, Sarah took one last look at the land they had made their own. The desert wind whispered through the sage, but she no longer felt the urge to walk against it, to fight it, to run. She was home, finally and fully, her restless feet stilled by love and purpose, and the simple, profound miracle of choosing to stay. Inside, the house was warm and full of noise, children's voices raised in excitement about the meal and the evening ahead. Sarah moved among them, serving food and settling disputes, and feeling the deep contentment of a life well lived. Yates caught her eye across the table, his expression soft with love, and Sarah felt her heart swell with gratitude. This was what she had walked through the desert to find, though she had not known it at the time. Not an escape from pain, but a place where pain could transform into something bearable. Not a forgetting of loss, but a remembrance that honored the dead while celebrating the living. Not an ending to her story, but a new chapter full of hope and possibility. After supper, as they sat on the porch in the gathering darkness, the children finally asleep and the ranch quiet around them, Yates pulled Sarah close. "Happy?" he asked simply. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Sarah answered truthfully. "You gave me back my life, Yates Reeves." "We gave each other back our lives," he corrected. "We built this together from broken pieces and grief and determination. We created something beautiful." Sarah nodded, resting her head on his shoulder, watching the stars emerge in the vast Nevada sky. She had walked so far, had traveled so many miles running from pain. But in the end, the greatest journey had been the one that led her here, to this porch, to this man, to this life. She had forgotten how to stop walking, but Yates had given her a reason. And in stopping, in choosing to stay, in building a life from the ashes of her grief, Sarah had found more than survival. She had found home. She had found love. She had found herself again, transformed but whole, scarred but strong, forever grateful for the day she walked into Gold Hill and a cowboy marshal saw past her dusty exterior to the woman she could become. The wind whispered across the desert, but Sarah did not move. Her walking days were over. Her staying days, her building days, her loving days had only just begun. And stretching out before her, as vast and full of promise as the Nevada sky, was a future she had earned through every painful step of her journey. She was finally home.